welcome to another episode of Marvin's Motor City Garage. Today we're going to talk about the finer details on an unbelievable Survivor 65 GTO. I'm just going to go over some of the little things under the hood. I'm going to point out some originality and just talk about maybe some errors that people make in restorations. So we'll just start with some of the finishes under the hood. As you can see, the core support and fender wells are painted a semi-gloss black. There's definitely a sheen. It's not flat, but it's definitely not shiny either. And one thing that's pretty noticeable is it's not pure black. It's actually a form of very dark gray. It actually has a little bit of a gray tone to it, as opposed to the stark starlight black that would be on the exterior of the car if the car was black. Take a look at the heater box. You can see how it's quite a bit shinier than the Firewall, and that's mainly because they were painted at two different times. The heater box came from another company. The Firewall was painted at the Fisher Body plant, and that's kind of a combination of overspray. If you look real close, you could see 5N on the Firewall, which, as we know, that designates GTO. It's on the trim tag right there, 5N. And usually on the Firewall they would write anything that pertained to the body for modification. So if it had a vinyl top, they would write the color. Probably buried somewhere under there is R, but the factory at the end of the day painted over all those markings. So you could see the 5N is there, but it's painted over by the factory. And like I said, it's a combination of overspray and black paint and that kind of stuff. Take a look at the voltage regulator. You can see it has the large stamp Delco Remy cover in gloss black. It has clear zinc screws holding it on. Take a look at the accelerator cable. It's also clear zinc with gray phosphate screws. You can see the master cylinder is painted black. It has a yellow zinc cap on it. It says Delco. The wiper motor is also gloss black, and all the hardware is clear zinc holding it on. You can see it has the original spring ring battery cables, which are slightly different than the reproductions. The font of the positive and the negative slightly different. And one thing that's sort of unique is the positive cable has red lettering. That's one thing that they still haven't made right with the reproductions. Note that there's only one strap holding the battery cable on the inner fender well. 65 only. By 66 and 7 they actually had 3 straps, but 1 year only. In 65 they only had 1 strap holding that cable on. Take a look at the plug wires. Original 1965 plug wires. They literally look brand new. I mean, they're stiff. They've been on the car a long time, but look at how nice that lettering is. See how fat the boots are? The reproduction boots are a lot slimmer than that. You could see how the rear is a 90-degree boot. That's how they are from the factory. You have your engine hook holding the engine harness. You could see how the factory taped off when they painted the engine blue. They got a little bit of blue on the valve cover and the hook. The bolts are gray phosphate holding the valve covers on. One thing unique about this car, it has the original hoses, which is just unheard of. And you can see the clear yellow part number. If you come over to the other side here, you could see the yellow radiator. And if you can't see it, but underneath here is a blue stripe. That's another way you could tell that it's an original radiator hose. If you come around here and look at the radiator, you could see it has a Julian date stamped on the radiator in ink with a 2-letter code designating it's a 3-core standard radiator for a 4-barrel GTO. If it was a tri-power, it would have had a 4-core radiator. And the 4-core radiators that I've seen this ink stamp has been up on top. So that's sort of unique to see it on the side like that. You could see these dust shields for the upper A-arms with the factory staples holding them in. And one thing about these original dust shields, they have these little white fiber strands in them. The reproductions unfortunately don't, so that's another way you could tell that these are original. And you could see the core support bushings. They were painted blue from the factory, the rubber. It's another interesting thing. Take a look at the lower pulley on the engine. You can see that's also painted engine color. That's a question that comes up a lot of times. The upper pulley is painted black on a manual steering car. And you can see there's the correct 7-blade clutch fan with aluminum blades. The center's black. So let's take a look at the hood hinges. The hood hinges are gray phosphate along with the springs. It looks like the spring is the same finish as the hinge. And this is a 65, so it has studs holding the hood on rather than bolts, with an extra thick washer and a flange nut. And here's your original hood pad. In pretty nice shape actually. And you can see it's molded. It also has a slight indentation right here, but it's similar to the reproductions. The reproductions are a lot stiffer, but you could see that they got the reproductions pretty good actually. We'll take a look at the overspray under the hood. So this is the factory overspray under the hood. I get a lot of questions about what this is supposed to look like. So as you can see, they just made a mess. I mean, they didn't really care. They hung the hood right here when they painted it, so that's why there's a blank spate on either side. That's from the fixture that they hung the hood on when they painted it. And you could see the Montero red is really heavy through here. You also have a little primer, which is odd because I didn't think the factory used primer like that, but apparently they did, because I mean that's definitely original. There's no doubt. You take a look at the hood latch. This is yellow zinc, clear zinc. This looks like clear zinc. A lot of cars that come in, this is all just painted body color or oversprayed, but there's a factory plating on the hood latch and hood spring, or not spring, but the hood pintle. They didn't actually use a spring on this until 66. So technically speaking, 64 and 5, there's no spring on here. 66 and 7 there is. But overall, it's a really nice original engine compartment. A lot of detail. It's amazing it's survived this long. You could see, unfortunately, the decal is coming off, but that's the location right in the center. And it has the correct RC15 radiator cap with the ears straight across. That's one thing with the reproduction radiators. They have a tendency for the ears to be turned either this way or that way. An original radiator, they always line up straight across. That's how you could tell an original radiator on a GTO. Another thing I get questions on is the routing of the washer hoses. So you can see the main washer hose starts there. It runs behind the fender well, out of view. It goes up over the battery, behind the battery clamp, and then they have a fitting right here. The reason they did this is if it was a 6-cylinder car, the wiper washer bottle would be located on the battery side. So they actually use the same hose as a 6-cylinder. On a V8 car, they would just extend it to this side. And that explains why there's holes here in the fender well. This is if the car was a 6-cylinder, this is where the battery tray would go. So that's kind of why they did that. But you can see how it just hangs right between the radiator and the core support with just 2 straps. Pretty simple. The headlight harness actually runs in front of the core support. You can't see it, but I see a lot of GTOs where they run the headlight harness right here, but that's not correct. It should be in front of the core support. You could see the alternator blade, pretty unique for 64 and 5 GTO. It has these real fine grooves. It's symmetrical. Some of the later alternator blades were a lot different than that. That's a real unique alternator blade. And you could see the alternator is the correct 1100704 37 amp alternator. There's the 2-letter code XC stamped on there in ink. And if we look real close, you might even be able to see the back of the diodes. They're also date coded. I don't know if you could get in there and see that. But yeah, overall, just a very, very nice, well-preserved 65 GTO. We'll take a look at the carburetor. So obviously it's an AFB Carter. It was rebuilt a number of years ago, but that is the original carburetor. You could see it has a dash pot that helps with the idle. You can see how the hoses are stamped gas. These are the PCV hoses. They're as hard as a rock, but they're original. Note that the carburetor spring's yellow, and the bracket for the accelerator is painted engine color. And you can see it has a kick down switch because it's an automatic. And one thing to take note of is the engine color. It's probably hard to see in the video, but the engine color is pretty blue. It's not as turquoise as the spray can versions that we're used to seeing. And I've actually made my own custom mix from this engine color to try to get it to look right. And you can see how blue that is. It's not turquoise. And just a couple more things. If you take a look at the inside of the fenders here, you can see how it's a combination of body color, overspray, and black. That's another question I get from a lot of people, is what's that supposed to look like? See how the parking lights are clipped onto the fender lips here. And something else that's interesting is this clip arrangement here. This is a coarse style body clip, but early 65s actually have the bolt going down like a 64 would. And this is a kind of a late 65, so they started using this clip arrangement with a real coarse thread. So that's sort of interesting. And we could probably move on out here a little bit, take a look at here. And you can see how the factory literally drew a line right here, and they broke off the overspray. So this is all body color. Down in the cowl is all body color. As you can see, the screws are gray phosphate. The squirters are clear zinc plating. And one thing sort of interesting that we noticed, look at the factory runs in the paint on this cowl panel. Right through here. So they must have sprayed it hanging up and it dripped out. So I thought that was sort of interesting. And you can see the little black body plugs they use in there. And they use those plugs also right here, same plug that goes there. But overall, a very nice original 40,000 mile engine compartment. Well, thank you for joining us today at the Marvin's Motor City Garage. We look forward to making more videos. Please leave a comment with your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you have to think. Thank you.